another one recently where we invited, I think it was 3,000 people, and they were all getting accessiBe for free, and 20 showed up. So,
Okay, so
something.
we are live. Hello, everyone. Can you see me? Can you hear me clearly? Could you please let me know right in the chat box, YouTube chat box? So just, drop a line, drop a word, or even smile so I could see that everything is working properly. Okay. So we're still waiting, guys. Okay,
We're live, we're
great.
not live. Okay.
Thank you very much, Helmut. And thank you very much, Jeffrey, as well. Okay, so we're back with the JetTalks live Q&A broadcast. And today, guys, we'll be covering one really delicate and complex, but on the other hand, it's actually a very useful and interesting subject. So it's web accessibility. And just to remind you all, today we're having, kind of the same format of the JetTalks broadcast, but it will be divided into two blocks. So the first block will be a short presentation from our guests, and the second block will be actually, the answers to the questions that you will leave in the chat box. So please don't hesitate to write your questions, write your comments as well, just to let us know if you like it or not. And, if you have any questions, just simply write it in the chat box. Okay, so right now, as you already know, we have two special guests from accessiBe team. Just let me switch my screen. Okay, so right now, I would like to introduce you to our two special guests. Please welcome Ren Regev, Affiliate Program Director. Hi, Ren. Okay, and also
Everyone.
please welcome Raphael Glantz, our Strategic Partnership Manager from accessiBe. Hi,
Hi,
Raphael.
everyone. Hi.
Okay, so guys, thank you very much for joining us today, for joining our live stream, and actually sharing your technology with our community. And I'm pretty sure that our community, our Croco people, prepared some really interesting, maybe sometimes tricky questions. So are you ready to answer those?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
That's great. So please don't worry. Our community is very, friendly and nice and polite. So there should be no issues with that. But yeah, guys, don't forget to ask, subject-oriented questions, not like in previous JetTalks, okay? So today we're talking about accessiBe and how it can be useful for you as website developers, website owners, and agencies as well. So yeah, get ready for it. Okay, so Raphael, I know that you've prepared a short presentation about what accessiBe actually is, why is it so useful and important for our Croco community, and why it is actually important for the, creating disability-friendly websites in general. So could you please shed some light on this topic for us?
I would love to. Thank you. I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly. And just let me know when you can see the handsome gentleman, accessiBe, and you'll also see presentation topics.
Okay, just wait for a minute, please.
Sure.
Okay. So right now it should be working just fine.
Excellent. So welcome to the presentation. First things first, what is web accessibility, right? So it's a set of rules, behaviors, code standards, and design guidelines that are meant to allow people with disabilities to effectively use websites. Now, effectively is different from equally, and I want to point that out really briefly, that somebody who is completely blind, I'm not going to be able to give them an exactly equal experience on a website like Netflix. That being said, we can enable them to perform the same actions and extract the same information as anyone else. And by the way, it's not just people who are blind who need adjustments on the internet. You have a very, very wide range of disabilities that can impact how people use the internet, everything from motor impairments to cognitive disorders to even aging-related disabilities. Now, There's a lot of laws that come into effect here, but in the United States, it's relatively simple. You either have Section 508 or ADA Title 3 that's relevant to you under US law. If you take government funding, you're generally Section 508. If you don't and you're a business, you're generally under ADA Title 3. In either situation, the standard for compliance is the WCAG 2.1. That's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's written and created by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. And these guidelines are actually the only internationally recognized set of guidelines for web accessibility used in the world. They are what you'll see in IS 5568, in ACA, and AODA, and all of these other regulations in different countries. When it comes to demand letters and lawsuits based on this type of legislation, we've actually seen an enormous uptick in the most recent couple of years, particularly during coronavirus time as well. And it is very, very difficult to fight these in court if you're not accessible, if you're not compliant, because it's a strict compliance law. You either are or are not accessible. And so the best option, whether you're being approached by a law firm who's seeking a settlement or a person with disabilities who just want to use your website, the best response is to proactively become compliant so this isn't an issue and everyone can shop at your store. This is a little bit more information about the marketplace as a whole. You have basically three main types of accessibility, and until accessiBe showed up, it was really only two. And the first one of those is accessibility plugins. For instance, UserWay or WP Access. Those in general don't comply fully with legislations. They're free to low cost, and they provide maybe 5 to 15% of the requirements for real accessibility. They do a lot of CSS things on the front end, like changing fonts or colors, but often lack more advanced features. Manual services, on the other hand, like AudioEye or User First, can provide complete accessibility. They have the absolute capability of making a website accessible. The issue is that it's a lot more costly, both in time and money. And for a small business in particular, that's not reasonable. On top of that, you need constant maintenance from a manual service provider, because every time you update your website with new information, even if it's a small image or a blog post, you need to call that company again and ask them to keep remediating your website. And necessarily, that's not something that business owners can deal with on a regular basis. With accessiBe, we realized that web accessibility is not going to be widespread until it is affordable, automated, and simple enough for a business owner to do it on their own. And that's what we created. We comply with WCAG 2.1 standards. Our pricing starts below $500 a year, which makes it affordable for even very small businesses. And we can make a website compliant in 48 hours or less. We'll even send you a statement of accessibility immediately after. And we rescan your website every 24 hours or every update to make sure that you stay in compliance and that our statement that we sent you is still valid. We actually spent a very long time working with people with disabilities to develop this product, and we continue to do that every day. This I'll touch on very, very briefly, but I do think it's important to note that we have a strong partnership with K1, and K1 is a very well-known investor in the tech space, and they've given us a lot of great connections and partnerships. The same is true for DigitalOcean, who help us to make sure that all of our technology, all of our hosting, all of our domains are at the very highest level of security humanly possible, or AI possible. In any case, we're trusted to protect well over 40,000. We're just over 50,000 today, actually. And one thing I love to say here is whether you're Burger King or Burger Joint on the corner, you get exactly the same product and generally at the same price. And we are very proud to be able to say that, because we really do serve Burger King and we really do serve other burger restaurants. This is actually a sample of that accessibility statement I mentioned before. It's just an explanation of what's been done to make your website accessible. And it's something that we send to anybody questioning your accessibility to explain what's going on. We'll also send you monthly accessibility compliance audits just to reinforce all of that. And if, God forbid, anyone sends you some kind of litigation or demand letter, which is entirely possible, because in our experience, one of the most common reasons that someone is sent a demand letter is because the person sending it doesn't understand how the accessibility system on that website works. So what we send back to any kind of complaint is first a compliance audit to show that your website is in fact accessible, then an overview of the compliance to explain how our tool works so that anyone can understand how to operate all of the features. Then we're going to send a failures request master, which is a large spreadsheet where users can log and document perceived accessibility failures, and then we can immediately address them, whether they're real failures or whether they're misperceptions. We can identify and address that immediately. We'll also send you an accessibility statement and our suggested response, which is a form letter that we've used to very, very, very good effect. We've actually had more than 2,500 customers approach us after having been served, usually demand letters. And in almost every single case, we've managed to either completely eliminate any settlement that was needed to be paid or significantly reduce it. Now, this is our installation process. It's extremely simple because, again, as I mentioned before, our goal was really to create a tool that any business owner can install themselves, even on a website that they made themselves on Wix. So we just have one line of JavaScript code. Immediately after installation, you're going to have that interface that we'll show you in a moment appear on your website. And then our AI remediation starts. And over the next 48 hours, we're going to scan that website. After 48 hours, but generally before, you're going to get a statement of accessibility directly to your email. And that's when you'll know that you're completely compliant and certified. Then, again, as we mentioned before, that's when what I call the shot clock starts. So every 24 hours or every update, we will scan that website completely to make sure that that statement of accessibility is still valid. This is a little bit of the separation between the two parts of our tool. The front side of our tool, sort of the CSS stuff, is considered by developers, though not by me because I'm not a developer, to be very, very simple. So, they tell me it's so easy to change colors and contrasts. I believe you. The more difficult part is the AI. So this is where we use contextual understanding. We use iris and OCR, optical character recognition technology, to be able to, for instance, look at images and determine what an alternative text for that image would be. Just to clarify, alternative texts are texts that go in images on the source code, and they describe the image for somebody who can't see it, who's using a screen reader. They're also used very frequently today for SEO purposes. And because of that, a lot of times websites will do alternative text for SEO and end up with alternative text that is not descriptive and therefore not compliant for a person with disabilities. So it's important to take all of that into account. One other thing I'll add here is that our contextual understanding actually looks at how a page is put together and the elements on that page. And then from that, it builds a quick navigation menu and it rearranges the entire keyboard navigation for that page so that it will make that the order of things will make sense to somebody who's not necessarily seeing everything right in front of them. This is what our interface looks like, and you'll notice that we have a lot of profiles here. So for instance, epilepsy safe, visually impaired, blind users, keyboard navigation. These profiles make it a lot easier for everyone to identify what we offer and what we can help you with. That being said, somebody who is fully blind is not going to be able to see that blind user's button and click it. And so we automatically work with any assistive technology that somebody's using. So for instance, if someone is blind and uses a screen reader or has dyslexia or something else and uses a screen reader, a quick note there, dyslexia is actually the most common learning disability amongst American children. And it can, in severe cases, require someone to use a screen reader to read out the words to them. Regardless, somebody who is fully blind certainly can't see that button. And so accessiBe knows how to detect assistive technology active on a person's computer and then send them a voice note saying, hey, you've entered an accessible website. Please hit Alt-1 to turn on accessible mode. In addition to sending them a voice message to prompt them, we also learned with all of our testing with people with disabilities that there are a lot of macros and shortcuts that are universal in the disabled community. And we learn to integrate with those because it's much better, in our opinion anyways, to let somebody use what they already know with us rather than have them learn a whole new system that's ours. There's some more videos that you can watch here. We actually have comprehensive demos, but that is the end of this presentation. I'm happy to do a live demonstration of our tool. If you'd like to see that, let me know.
You should be able to hear me right now, right? Can you hear me? Great. Yeah, because I got mixed up with the microphones. That's okay. Yeah, why not? You can show us the live presentation. That would be probably very interesting. And we already have one question. We'll ask it a bit later. So Jeffrey, don't worry. You'll get your answer. So yeah, please show us your live presentation and we'll move on a bit later. Okay.
Phones. Sounds like a plan. Can you see new summer collection?
Yep.
Excellent. So in the lower left-hand corner, this is, by the way, demo.accessiBe.com. Our website's accessiBe.com, so anybody who wants to can access this whenever they need to, test things out. We specifically developed this website to not be accessible, to demonstrate that accessiBe can make a website accessible. So as an example, we don't have any alt text behind the images normally. Before we get into that, though, I want to point out that I just opened this window and it's already got a check mark on the icon. Why is that? That's because we use local storage, not cookies, so we don't affect GDPR, CCPA, or any of that, but we use local storage on that person's browser to save their accessibility settings, because if somebody is actually blind or otherwise living with a disability, we don't want them to go through the process each time of setting up their settings. If we can save them for them, so much the better. So first things first, I'll show you a few simple things on the interface. For instance, we can do readable fonts. Readable font actually just switches the font to the person's default on their computer. We assume that they can read that. We can highlight titles and links, and this makes them more visible for people with disabilities. We can also change specific colors. So there are a very wide range of people who have color blindnesses, and not everybody is blind or can see the same colors. And so it's important to be able to switch all of the colors to whatever you need. That being said, we can also do different contrasts and saturations for light, monochrome, high saturation, and we have a reading mask. So we've actually recently added a whole bunch of new additions for specific other profiles. That particular one goes in the ADHD profile, and I personally really appreciate that one. I never knew this was available before. And this is actually an opportunity I want to use to point out that accessiBe and accessible websites are not just for people with disabilities. There are a lot of people who might be a little bit older, who don't consider themselves to have a disability, but would very much appreciate a system like this when they're shopping online. There's an online dictionary here that'll define anything for you. So if you don't know what Black Friday is, for instance, and it's that Friday, you can get an explanation so you can get the deal. But there's also people who don't know a lot of words in English because maybe they speak English as a second language. And so they might be very intelligent, they just don't know that word. They need to look up that word too. And they also want to patronize your business. So it's not just about people with disabilities, it's about a better, unique environment for everybody to browse your website. Let's look on the back end for a second. I'm going to hit reset settings so that we're going to make the website back the way it should be and not with all these crazy colors. And let me inspect this image for a moment and show you what we get. Because if I inspect this image, there's absolutely zero alt text, and that is not accessible at all. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit Alt-1 on my keyboard, which is exactly how somebody would actually turn on accessible mode. And as you can see, now accessible mode is on for blind users, screen reader, and keyboard navigation, and we'll use that in just a second. For now, I want to point this out. If I hover over this, you see that in the script we're highlighting this. It says extra sale, 30% off, shop now, shopping, stock, and shop. And that's what's in that image. And we can do the same thing here. I get sale, Black Friday sale, illustration, and design. I can tell you, as personally, I've been at the company for a little bit more than a year, and I have actually seen RAI getting better and better at describing images. And the more websites that we're on, the more sessions that we're on, the better RAI will get. Let's take a look at the keyboard navigation for just a second. I'm just using the tab key right now. And we actually did a research paper that you can find on our blog. We evaluated more than 10 million web pages. And we identified that there are certain elements that are more likely than others to be accessible. One of those elements was pop-ups. And one thing I really want to point out about this pop-up is that you have a readout here. So it says playing to screen readers in the bottom right. And that's extremely important. If you don't tell a screen reader user that you've just opened a pop-up, they don't know they're on a pop-up. And in some cases, they actually have to restart the computer completely because they can't exit that pop-up properly. 98% of menus and pop-ups are inaccessible according to our research today on the web. Images, on the other hand, 52% of them are accessible, and we believe that a big part of that is related to SEO reasons. But regardless, with our system, you can absolutely navigate this without any problem. You can exit it without any problem, and you can continue on to the rest of the page without any problem. I would love to answer any questions you might have and show anyone anything else that they'd like to see here.
Okay, so as of now, I'm not sure. Okay, we have one question. I decided to leave it for a bit later. Right now, actually, I have a question for you because, like, during your presentation and also surfing through your website, uh, I got to the fact, I found out that it takes only like 48 hours to install everything, right? To analyze the website and make it completely compliant. So, how does it actually work? Like one single line of code and everything is working, just right like this, right? So how is it working? Well, I'm not asking you to tell me all the secrets and all the tips and tricks of yours, but it's just like I'm a girl.
Ah,
I don't understand, like, what's that magic?
I want to preface this by saying that about half our development team is female, and they're much, much smarter than I am. So let's not go that way. But I honestly am not a developer, so I can't really get into the really deep technical bits of how this works. What I can say is that accessiBe takes structural HTML and other elements that don't affect GDPR or any of that data stuff. We don't take any PII data ever. And that structural data enables us and our contextual understanding engine from the information and the sort of training the AI has had from literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of sessions on a daily basis. Um, it learns how to put together websites, and it learns the way websites should function. So if we've got 10,000, 15,000 e-commerce websites and you add an e-commerce website, it won't take more than an hour or two in most cases for our AI to understand your e-commerce website because it's seen a million other e-commerce websites. That's the way I understand it working. In addition, on a technical level, accessiBe, there's no unique identifier in our script. So you can push that code in as many websites as you want and it'll function. The unique identifier, if you will, is actually in our licensing. So as long as you have an active license, accessiBe will work.
That's great. That's actually amazing. Well, as for me.
That's what I thought when I got hired.
Yeah, and also like okay, there is another question. Like there are some web developers, right? Um, okay, they're smart, they know everything. In your opinion, how much time would it take for a website developer to complete the same thing that accessiBe does, and how much efforts would it take to do completely the same thing?
Well, it really depends on the website. It's a really important question to ask because some websites are one page. And so for a one page website, probably a developer can do that pretty quick. It's not going to be too much trouble. But some websites are 100,000 pages. Some websites are e-commerce stores. They have a unique page for every SKU. They're updating 100 SKUs a day. You might need a developer full time for that. That might just be their job. I can tell you that at big companies that have dozens of websites, that's a whole department. So it really depends on what sort of business you're in. Don't get me as saying that manual remediation isn't good. Manual remediation can be a great thing, but I think that we need to look at it rationally and say, in some cases, this can absolutely be done. We have the money and the time for it and the motivation. And in other cases, you have millions of pages. It's absolutely not feasible for humans to really do this amount of work in any amount of time that would make it relevant. So we have to rely on AI.
Thank you. Yeah, and what about the responsibilities actually? Like, whose responsibility is it to create a website to make it disability friendly? Is it like on the website owner or on the website developer? Who should kind of start this process of creating or making the website disability friendly?
To my knowledge, legally, it's the website owner, it's the business owner's requirement to do that. That being said, a lot of business owners, their expertise is not in websites. That's not their main thing. They're trying to run a business. And so, in my mind, I think it really is the responsibility of the developer and the agency to look into this and say, this is what the law is. I'm going to offer you a solution. I'm going to find you a solution. If you don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine. That's your business. But at least on a moral level, if not on a legal level, I think it's really important to at least offer your customers that because it's also great business practice to say, look, you're at risk and you're essentially locking people out of your store, which no one wants to do.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, do you have any, I would say, tips for the website developers how they can convince the website owner to actually make the website disability friendly? What
Absolutely.
would be your
So
suggestions? You know?
I would say one, let's look at it instead of as a required compliance thing. Let's look at it as accessibility on demand and a unique experience for each user that comes into your website. Instead, regular manual remediation changes the changes the template permanently. It changes your source code. accessiBe only changes the session so that each user will have an individual experience, the colors that they want, the size that they want, the font that they want. I think that's a much more attractive sell than just comply with the law. Although I will add, complying with the law can be a very attractive thing as well. I most recently I was out of the country in Las Vegas right before Corona happened in February, and I was giving a very similar presentation. And a gentleman interrupted me saying that he was on the board of a company that got a $10,000 demand letter, and they chose to pay that demand letter to just settle and thought it would go away. And he happens to have 60 locations for his business. And the day he paid that demand letter, he got 59 more demand letters for the other 59 locations. And so while on our side, we absolutely don't want to focus on the legal aspect because on a personal note for me, I don't want to paint the disabled community as litigious because they genuinely are not. Um, it is something that a business owner has to consider because it is a liability for your business.
Yeah. Okay. So right now, we have some questions already. So thank you very much for answering those. Because, like, I was personally curious because, especially in regards to the responsibility, like who's
Mm-hmm.
responsible for everything. So that's actually really interesting. Just give me a minute. Okay, there was one question. Can a developer use one license on unlimited client sites? Um, Go
It would
ahead.
certainly be nice, but unfortunately, no. The issue is that each different domain is a different potential litigation and requires different scanning and everything else. So our licensing is per domain and per year.
Okay, that's great. We have another comment saying that Benny Berser says that he had a look at your product and it looks great. So, guys,
Thank you.
cheers for you. Okay, so Jeffrey. Jeffrey is asking a tricky question. So the first one is, what were the settlements settled for in average, and have there been a high amount of demand letters coming your way due to having the overlay installed?
So I'll go one by one on those. I believe the average amount that is usually settled for is in the range of 10 to 30,000 US. The reason for that being that a lot of times they'll ask for a 5 to 10,000 financial settlement, and then they'll ask for injunctive relief, which is generally manual accessibility. So injunctive relief, a lot of times they'll have to go and change their template and then resubmit that template and show that it's compliant and everything. And that can get very, very expensive depending on the website. So in my mind, it's around $20,000 to $30,000 on average. If we've been getting a lot of those, not as many as you might think. We actually have a lot of testimonials from our testers, from our users, from our community of people with disabilities and without, by the way, and we believe that the best way to provide accessibility is through an overlay, is through customization, for the simple reason that everyone's different, not just everybody with a disability is different. So the best way that we can provide the best experience for everyone is to let them choose their own experience. Manual accessibility by necessity gives everybody the same experience because they're changing the template permanently. And not only does that limit the way that you can use animations and use colors and all that other stuff, again, everybody's the same, and I don't think that that's really the best way to do it.
Okay, and there is another question from Jeffrey as well. So, how good are the alt text AI descriptions? Does it ever leave anything out? Are they enough to meet ADA and WCAG requirements in all images, emoticons, and SVG, etc.?
Yes. As far as I know, and in all of my experience here, they've always been very descriptive and certainly sufficient to meet ADA requirements. Um, that being said, if you mislabel an image or something like that, it might not register it's an AI. So we do need to take things like that into account. But as long as the image is labeled as an image, it should have no problem getting alt text.
Okay, and there is another question actually from Benny. He's asking if it is obligated by law, to have a disability-friendly website. And he's saying, like, let's say I have a small local restaurant or
Mm-hmm.
esthetician. Yes,
Yes.
so
Long story short, yes, there is a confusion there, and let's go into that really briefly. You have in the ADA, you have Title 1 and you have Title 3. I'm assuming there's also Title 2 in between, but I don't know too much about that one. So, Title 1 of the ADA has a stipulation in it that says businesses with 15 employees or less do not need to accommodate the disability needs of their employees. It does not say anything about the general public. In ADA Title 3, it was decided by the DOJ that the law says places of public accommodations need to be accessible to everybody. And the DOJ in 2018, the Department of Justice, ruled that business websites and pretty much every other website are considered places of public accommodations, and therefore they must be accessible to all. So it's the same principle as if you have a small restaurant but you don't have a ramp, somebody could sue you just the same as if you were a large restaurant.
I see. Okay. And also, Helmet is asking about the pricing. Well, I guess
Mm-hmm.
you can, visit the website and see what are the pricing plans and stuff. But okay, just a quick question about the pricing for very small websites, like with 5 to 10 pages.
Mm-hmm. So generally, when we encounter customers or partners who have a lot of small websites, we speak to them individually and we find something that works. At accessiBe, we're really all about win-win. And so we do whatever we can. I won't say that we'll do absolutely anything to make a deal because everybody has limitations. But we really try and look holistically at every partner that we onboard and understand the best thing that we can do for them.
Okay, great. That's actually very client oriented.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question from Jeffrey. Just give me a minute. What do you think about settlements from the Bureau of Internet Accessibility, which say that overlays are not a solution? Link. There was a link probably in
Mm-hmm.
this question, and people like Carl Groves, Adrian, and Chris Ravenberg.
Yes.
Tricky question.
It's to me it's not so tricky. I disagree.
Hmm.
Um, ex I personally don't consider myself to be an accessibility expert. I've tried to learn everything I can. But we have quite a few who work with us here, including people who actually have these disabilities and live with them on a daily basis. And in speaking with them, what I found out is you're never going to have an absolutely perfect 1000% website that everybody's going to love and nobody's going to have problems with. I think both sides here have good intentions, and we're trying the approach that we believe is the most effective and reasonable to reach the greatest number of people. In my mind, and in the minds of the people that we work with, we think that the customization is the best way to go. And also, it, it would be very, very difficult for accessibility to be widespread if it had to be manual. If everything had to be manual, I really don't think it would be possible to have any significant portion of the internet accessible. Right now, more than 98%, and that's conservative, of the internet is completely inaccessible to people with disabilities. And that's not going to change until it is incredibly easy for a business owner to change that.
Yeah, for sure. And like how those people, there are a lot of them. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people with disabilities, and how they could
It's
actually buy a
26% of the
product.
United States, according to the CDC.
Wow,
26% of American adults are living with a disability.
that's a lot. That's a
It's a
huge
lot.
number.
It's $490 billion in disposable income, according to some studies.
Okay, so Benny is saying thank you to you for answering the
Of
previous
course.
question, and he's also asking, as you mentioned, DOG, does this mean these rules are only for the U.S. or is it an international issue?
So it's absolutely an international issue. The laws in question from the DOJ and the ADA and the Section 508, those are just US laws. I will say that laws have been picking up around the world, though. AODA, in particular in Canada, it's the Ontarians with Disabilities Act. That actually gives the Canadian government the power to directly fine businesses, over 50 employees, of course. But if your website is not compliant, they can, that's with the WCAG 2.1, they can fine you $100,000 Canadian, so not real American dollars, but Canadian dollars, every day that you're not compliant. And that's two really important things. That's one, a very big sum of money. And number two, it's the government having the power to directly fine somebody. So it's definitely being taken very seriously around the world.
And it should be, probably, because we have a
I
lot
agree.
of, just guys, just imagine you have a lot of customers with disabilities, and they cannot simply buy your products because your websites are not accessible. So yeah, we'll have to think about that for sure.
Absolutely. You know what I say? I say in a lot of the calls that I have, you own a business, sir. If you saw a gentleman in a wheelchair outside your door, you wouldn't lock the door. No, you'd run outside and try to sell him something, just like you would with every other customer. And so we're very, very passionate about that. But really quickly, it's also about employment. It's not just about somebody with disabilities being able to buy something from you. It's also about them being able to work for you, or you being able to work for them. And that's, I would even say, more important than including somebody in the consumer world.
Okay, so we have another question from Jeffrey. He's very active today. I guess
Great.
I guess we have to start the nominations of the most active participant of the live stream. Okay, Jeffrey. So he's asking, is having the overlay through a target on you in general for lawyers to dig deep into your site?
In our experience, not so much. And in our case, if they do want to dig deep into the site, they'll find it's compliant. So we're okay with that. I know that there were some articles written about overlays being used like that. We have not really come across it. And we also don't class ourselves as too much of an overlay, because that tends to lump you in with someone like Userway or WP Access. And not to say anything negative about them, it's just a different product.
Okay. And also, there was another question from Joe, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Okay, so it sounds like it's just not practical to achieve compliance on your own without a service like this. Is that correct? What do you
I,
think?
I kind of have to agree, with everything I've said here. If I disagreed, that'd be very strange. But yes, I agree very wholeheartedly. And, again, it depends on the size of the website. If you have a two-page website, I think you very well could uh, fix that on your own if you really wanted to. But if you have a serious website and you're a serious business, I think it's almost irresponsible to do it manually, because you could be directing those resources so much more effectively elsewhere.
Okay, and there's another question from Benny. Just give me a second. Okay, Benny's saying thank you again. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against it. I'm a small time freelancer and have small clients at the moment that spend 1k euros for a site. So a $490 per year will be hard on them. So what's the question?
I don't want to get into a price negotiation publicly, but you're very, very welcome to contact us after the fact, and we'll talk to you.
Yeah, and just like you said before, like, you communicate with your customers and you find the best solutions for them, so which is good.
Absolutely right.
Yes, and there was also another question from Vanny. Can you repeat the Australian law?
The Australian law? I don't believe I talked about
Or
an Australian law. Maybe that was the Canadian law, the
maybe
AODA.
Canadian, maybe Australian. Yeah.
I I think I mentioned the Canadian AODA, that's the Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And that actually comes into effect January 1st, 2021, so very, very soon, in Ontario, Canada. And it basically gives the Canadian government the ability to fine any business with more than 50 employees that has a website that's not accessible according to the WCAG 2.1 AA standards. And by the way, there's A, AA, and AAA. A is not acceptable, AA is acceptable, AAA is a pipe dream, to explain it very, very briefly. And that's more or less it. It gives them the ability to fine the business $100,000 a day for each day of noncompliance. And that's extremely concerning for, in particular, businesses that are just at 50 employees, or 51 employees. But every major enterprise that operates in the US, more or less, operates in Canada too. So I think that I would not be surprised, certainly, if we see a big increase in interest and discussion about this as AODA gets closer to implementation.
Okay, so as of now, yeah, Benny says that that was not about Australia. He just thought that you mentioned Australia, so it was about Canada.
Oh,
Yeah,
no
anyways, it's
problem.
already 6:40, guys. We're
Oh,
we're
time flies.
lightning fast. So okay, let's just ask the last question from Jeffrey, and we'll be probably ending our live conversation for today. So just give me a minute. Jeffrey is asking, I once read about getting something called a VPAT report or some other acronym. Is that something you provide?
So we don't provide, you know, pro manual audits or anything like that. We have a tool called ACE that we created in order to scan websites on the session and not just on the source. So we'll be able to identify changes like accessiBe makes, and it can actually provide you a 10-page downloadable PDF report on the accessibility of your website. But as far as those types of documentation, we don't provide a VPAT.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And also, I have probably the last question for today. Um, so, what if your client, for example, gets a lawsuit? And what would be his first actions? What he needs to do, first of all, I would say like the first steps, like during the
Absolutely.
emergency procedure. Yeah.
Great question. Great question. So the first thing to remember is that every single customer and client and partner with accessiBe has a partner manager or a customer manager. They have a place to go and somebody to talk to. And so we tell everybody, contact me. Not all, and not everybody contacts me. I tell my people contact me. Everybody else tells their people contact me. And you tell us immediately. We immediately respond to you and ask, hey, do you have any documentation with this? Did you get an actual letter? Can you send us the letter? We want to see what they said. And then we go through that litigation support package that we talked about before in the presentation. So we're going to send you first an audit to your website to show, is it compliant? Is it not compliant? We're going to send you scans to make sure that we have proof that it's compliant. We're going to send a compliance overview to explain to the person who's complaining about your website how to use accessiBe so they understand how our system works. Then we're going to send a failures request master. Sorry, I forgot how to talk English for a second. A failures request master, which is a very big spreadsheet where they can log and document perceived accessibility holes or problems, and then we can address those immediately or tell them they're not real, depending on what the story is. Finally, we'll send you your accessibility statement again, and we're going to send you a suggested response, which is basically a form letter that we've used to very, very, very good effect. Now, last thing, that scan that we send you, in addition to corroborate the audit, it's generally an ACE scan. So that's ace.accessibe.com. Anybody, you're welcome to go check your website for its accessibility there. It's completely free. You get a 10-page downloadable PDF report, and you can even take our branding off if you want to send it to your clients.
Okay, that's great actually. And also Jeffrey is curious about once you send that package to the lawyers, do they back off all the time, or have things got much worse in some cases?
I can tell you that in over 98% of those cases, and we've dealt with quite literally over 2,000 in the last 18 months, when we send that suggested response, we do not get a response to that. They just drop it. And again, I mentioned before that the disabled community is truly not a litigious community, and I really do not want to paint that community in that way. That being said, there are an enormous amount of these demand letters being sent out, and a lot of the time, the goal is to get a financial settlement. If somebody is looking to get a financial settlement and you show them, hey, you want to take me to court, it's going to be a long fight and we're probably going to win, they're going to back off because that's not good business for them. They're much better off going to the next victim, which is a very depressing state of affairs. But for us, we're very happy that we're able to defend all of our clients, and we've not had any customers sued after installing accessiBe.
Okay. So, guys, as I can see, okay, there was another question about how does a user with disabilities discover the toolbar overlay, but you already showed that. Maybe you can repeat a little bit, in short.
Very briefly, there's a lot of different types of assistive technology, everything from a screen reader to a click stick. And generally, all of those are on your operating system because you need them from the moment you turn on the computer. Our tool knows how to identify those active on your computer and then send you either a voice note or other message to tell you how to trigger the correct accessibility. We are also compatible with existing macros and shortcuts in the disabled community. So if they try something they know, it'll probably work with us.
That's great. Okay, guys.
I think so too.
Thank you very much, Rafi. Thank you very much, Fran, for joining us today.
Thanks for hosting us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Guys, our Croca people, I want to say that we've prepared a surprise for you. Right now in the description, if you check, we have the referral link with 10% discount for accessiBe plans, for all the plans, whatever you choose. And I just got a notice from my colleague saying that there was an issue with the referral link, but it will be fixed, so don't worry. And also, if you want to get this link, you can send us, a message in WhatsApp and in Facebook, and also contact our support team. So don't worry about that. Just, let us know that you need this link and we'll provide it. And also, we've created a special plugin for accessiBe created by Crocoblock, and it is completely free of charge. So you can also download it, and it will, make your life even more easier when installing, customizing accessiBe on your website. So thank you very much one more time, guys, for joining us today, for taking your time.
Thanks for having us.
And yeah, thank you to our Croca people for also taking your time and watching us and being active, asking questions. Thank you, Jeffrey and Benny and all the guys. Thank you very much. So I'll see you probably in the next video or in the next JetTalks, and stay tuned for the updates and our messages in the community. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.